Hi students, this is our next lecture in Bio 102 online course. I think this will be our last lecture before the spring break. You will have your spring break coming very soon. I might put some review questions, or actually I have put some review questions on the announcement, and I will be happy to answer all your questions along the lines of the study guide and the announcement. But we need to go over one more topic, which is the urinary system. So we now know everything about the digestion, metabolism, respiration, circulation, blood, the immunity, the endocrine system, and now the urinary system. So what is the urinary system? System of producing and disposing of the urine. The urine is the body fluid which contains waste, actually substances that we do not need, and moreover substances that might be toxic for us. For example, ammonia, urea, uric acid, all these nitrogen containing substances that are harmful and not removed through sweating, not removed through lungs, not removed through the gastrointestinal tract, not lost with feces. So the urinary system takes care of that. It gets rid of the toxic substances, uh, especially nitrogen-containing substances. Now, the urine is produced in organ, which is called kidney, or we have two kidneys, right? So the urine is produced in the kidneys. You see the kidneys shown here. They are kind of like bean shaped. This light straw yellow colored hats on top of each kidney are your good friends. You are familiar with them. The adrenal glands, right? Then each kidney is supplied with blood. You see a large artery that goes from, it's actually a branch of the aorta, which goes down from the aorta to the uh, uh, abdominal cavity and into the retroabdominal space, which is between the back and the back of the abdomen. That's where kidneys are. And each kidney has a big renal artery that supplies it with a large amount of blood. Per day, kidneys receive approximately 100 to 200 to 150 liters of blood. It's actually a huge amount of blood. It's more blood than the entire muscular system receives, for example, or it's a much larger amount of blood than the amount that the brain receives. So kidneys are richly supplied with blood, and of course the blood flows through the arteries, then arterioles in the kidney, then capillaries, then collected into vanules, and flows out of the kidney into this blue-colored renal vein, which then merges with the vena cava inferior hollow vein. Uh, then, so the take-home message, please remember that the urine is produced in the kidneys, nowhere else. See, the kidneys make urine from start to finish. You see here the kidneys are connected with the urinary bladder. Each kidney has like a tube that connects it with the urinary bladder. This tube is called ureter, right? So we have two kidneys, two ureters, one urinary bladder. And remember that the ureters only transport the urine to the urinary bladder, and the urinary bladder only expunges the urine from the body through the tube that is shown in the lower part of this picture, and it is called urethra. And the kidney is not produced in the ureters or in the urinary bladder or in the urethra. It is just being transported in its ready condition. The ready condition is made in the kidneys. Then a little bit about the anatomy. This is very quick and simple overview of the anatomy of the kidney. So you see the kidney, bean-shaped organ. The blood is brought to the kidney by the renal artery. You see on the left an arrow points to this red-colored blood vessel. It says renal artery. Then the branches of the renal artery, arterioles and capillaries, enter the so-called kidney pyramids. You see pyramids shown slightly darker than the rest of the kidney. That's where the urine is actually produced, in the pyramids. Then from the pyramids, the produced urine, the ready urine, is collected to calyces. In singular, it's calyx. There is a major calyx shown here and minor calyx. What does this word calyx remind you of? Chalice. You heard this word chalice? Like if there are some Roman Catholics or Orthodox Christians, you definitely heard this term, chalice. You know, you go to when you are taking communion, you approach the chalice, and the priest gives you the Eucharist, holy gifts from the chalice. So chalices are, the word calyx is related to chalice. So in the chalice, a chalice is a vessel, kind of like a cup, right? Then these chalices merge together, forming a large body called renal pelvis. And then the renal pelvis continues as the ureter, which, as we already mentioned, it transports the urine from the kidney to the urinary bladder. Okay, then if we look inside a renal pyramid, in the little kidney, in the upper left corner, you see this section of the kidney, and there is an arrow going from there. It's like, imagine that we zoom on the renal pyramid, and inside renal pyramids we find what is called nephrons. A nephron is a microscopic working unit of urine production. Right? So actually there are millions of nephrons. Each renal pyramid contains a few million nephrons. They are tiny, you don't see them, you need a dissection microscope, pretty powerful microscope to see nephrons. And each nephron is the unit that produces a little bit of kidney, and then, a little bit of urine, and then this urine is collected into, like we said, into the calyces, then into the pelvis, and then into the ureter. Now, the big, thick red arrow points to the beginning part of a nephron, which is called renal corpuscle. It's a ball-like structure, like a little ball. It has blood capillaries surrounded by epithelial capsule. So that's where the blood is filtered. In the glomerular corpuscle, the blood is filtered. The blood arrives into these capillaries, and under the pressure, it goes through the walls of the capillaries and is collected into the capsule, and then flows down the remaining parts of the nephron. Please note, this filtration is done according to size. You see, there is a common misconception that the kidney filters blood. It it rids us of poisons, right? And whatever is needed remains in the blood. That's not quite so. You see, the kidneys are not that intelligent. They're not that clever. The filtration occurs simply according to size. Large particles, cells, and proteins remain in blood because they do not fit into these little holes in the walls of the capillaries in the renal corpuscle. The rest actually fits. So what is being filtered from the blood into the nephron is water, ions, salts, minerals, vitamins, single amino acids, for example. They are small enough to pass through the filter. Glucose, rather large amount of glucose. Glucose is 100% filterable, so a lot of it goes from the blood into the nephron. Then you see, imagine that from the renal corpuscle, this fluid, this filtrate, flows through these convoluted, sort of coiled, supercoiled tubules, and then goes into a kind of a loop and then straight down. Right? In these coiled structures and in the loop, what happens is called reabsorption. The blue arrow points to the this convoluted tubules in the nephron, and it's the part of the nephron where the useful substances like water, ions, glucose, also vitamins, also single amino acids, are moved back to blood. Right? So they are reabsorbed. That's the mechanism, actually. See, initially, a lot of stuff is filtered. If it is small enough to pass through the holes in this filter, it finds itself in the nephron. But then, if this stuff is useful, then it is reabsorbed. And for example, glucose, it's 100% filterable. So if your blood contains, say, 100 milligrams of glucose, then 100 milligrams per each deciliter is squeezed into the nephron. But then in the nephron, in these convoluted tubules, all of it is reabsorbed. Right? So then the filtrate flows down this straight duct. The yellow arrow points to it, and at this point it is already rid of glucose. All glucose is taken back, so urine should not have glucose. And also, no arrow is shown here, but remember that some useless substances are also secreted from blood capillaries into the nephron. The useful substances move from the nephron into the blood capillaries. This is called reabsorption. But some substances that our body has no need in, for example, drugs, that like medicines that you take, they are deeply foreign to the body and they are not part of our metabolism. So the blood gets rid of them. They are secreted back from the blood into the tubules of the nephron and lost with urine. Then the straight duct, that's the one shown with the yellow arrow, merges with what is called here renal papilla. It's actually the beginning of the collecting system of the urine. Papilla continues as calyx, and calyces merge into pelvis, and pelvis continues as ureter, and the ureter transports the urine into the urinary bladder. So that's the production of the urine. Remember, it has three components: filtration, reabsorption, secretion. Then this slide, please ignore this figure too. It shows you some details of the renal filtration. See, the blood capillaries in the renal corpuscle, they are very peculiar. They have what is called filtration slits Right? So the blood uh, in the capillary communicates with the capsule of the renal corpuscle. It can flow into the renal corpuscle under the pressure. But again, see, these slits that are shown, they are not very large, right? So large particles like cells, imagine, well, even red blood cell, which is the smallest cell in the body, still it is too large to fit into the slit, uh, filtration slit. Uh, Also, protein molecules, they are big molecules. Recall, protein consists of amino acids, and these amino acids bond with each other, forming very long chains, like 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 of them, and then they coil, make a certain spatial structure. So it's a large thing. It does not fit into the filtration slit. So normally in cells and proteins remain in the blood. They should not be in the urine. But you see, it says here slits with slits diaphragm. The word diaphragm implies something that can make a slit wider or narrower. Right? So slits are small, but still their size varies a little bit due to this diaphragm. And the thing about the renal corpuscle, it's very sensitive to inflammation. When the tissue that surrounds the corpuscle gets inflamed, in people with glomerulonephritis, it's an acute inflammation in the kidney. The diaphragm opens, so the slits become larger, and so the patient with acute glomerulonephritis loses cells from his or her blood, red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, all they go through these expanded filtration slits, and proteins can be also lost to the urine, and they can be detected in the urine, and it's usually a bad sign. This is when a patient arrives with complaints that his he, he or she feels pain in the waist, back at the waist level, some kind of dull pain. That may be glomerulonephritis, and then doctors make the urinalysis and see protein in the blood, and they see some cellular elements protein in the urine and cellular elements in the urine. They conclude that yes, it's glomerulonephritis needs to be treated immediately. Usually it's of infectious origin, so antibiotics and anti-inflammatory drugs like cortical hormones. Remember, corticoid hormones, they're anti-inflammatory. Okay, now this sort of expands a little bit on what we have already learned about making urine. So what happens to the filtrate to make urine? Filtrate is something that simply squeezes through these filtration slits into the capsule of the renal corpuscle. Right? So it's a fluid. Then what happens to it? It contains water, dissolved ions, dissolved glucose, amino acids, nitrogenous wastes, nitrites, urea, also ammonia. It has no proteins and no cells. Then, when this filtrate flows through the remaining part of the nephron, reabsorption takes place. Right? So, dissolved substances are taken out of filtrate and back into blood by reabsorption. What is not reabsorbed? Poisonous waste. Urea, not reabsorbed. It remains in the nephron. It becomes concentrated to closer to the end of the nephron, and then it is normally lost with urine. And also to the last bullet point, it says tubular secretion or further removal of certain substance from blood also occurs during the making of the urine. So your urine is actually water, right? Some toxic substances that your body does not want to keep, like urea or uric acid, nitrites, etc. And substances that are secreted into your urine from the blood, and we already mentioned like some uh, medicines that you take, like aspirin or whatever, countertop or prescription medicine. These substances cannot be metabolized, they cannot be used as food by our organism. They're not nutrients. So they go from the blood capillaries in the kidney into the nephron and are lost with urine. Uh, Then the remaining part of the urinary system. So we talked about the kidney, we talked about the uh, uh, ureter, and the ureter brings the urine into the urinary bladder. Then from the urinary bladder, during urination, the blood goes into the urethra and out of the body. And you see here, I made this red arrow pointing to some kind of lump which surrounds the urethra. It is located in men only, women do not have it. In men, this lump is underneath the urinary bladder in the beginning part of the urethra, where the urethra goes right from the urinary bladder. And you need to know about this lump. It's actually a gland. It's an endocrine gland, by the way. It produces hormones that circulate in the blood, the so-called prostaglandins. Prostaglandins are pro-inflammatory hormones. They are, in a way, they're opposite to hormones of the adrenal cortex. Those are anti-inflammatory, and prostaglandins are pro-inflammatory. But the main reason you guys all should know about this gland is that in men, especially men after 50, in certain cases, not always, but not it's not a rare thing also. So in certain cases, it begins to grow. The tissue of the prostate gland has cells that may begin to divide mitotically at a very high rate. So the size of the prostate increases twofold, threefold, and it really strangles the urethra as it grows. So men who have this so-called prostate uh, hyperplasia, it's called abnormal prostate growth. They feel pretty bad. They're not happy with their urination. They always feel that some urine is in the bladder after urination. So the urination is incomplete. Uh, uh, it, it's a dangerous condition. Well, it causes discomfort, but what is worse, prostate hyperplasia can become prostate cancer. So men who have symptoms of this growth of prostate must see a doctor, urologist, and the doctor will do simple and fast surgery on the prostate gland. He or she will remove part of the gland, and the surgeon does not even have to open the abdominal cavity or something, because the surgeon can reach the prostate using a catheter through the urethra, and then when the prostate is reached, then the surgery takes just a few minutes. It's not really a big deal. I know some men who developed symptoms after when they were like 55, 56, and when they went to the surgery afterwards, they said that, oh, it's a huge relief, and it decreases the risk of cancer. Uh, Now, the urinary bladder, a little bit more detail about it. So it's a cavity, right, which is surrounded by tissue, including muscle, so-called detrusor muscle. When it contracts, the urinary bladder expunges the urine to the urethra and out of the body. Normally, it occurs during urination. In the urethra, there are, actually, the very beginning of the urethra, there is a muscle which is called sphincter, and it is under our control normally. That if we are uh, uh, continent, right? If we can control our urination, then we can voluntarily relax or contract this urethral sphincter. But the detrusor muscle is actually not under our conscious control. It does not, we cannot command it, hey, contract. What commands it to contract is when the uh, um, urinary bladder becomes filled with urine. That's, that's when the command goes to the detrusor muscle and it contracts and expunges the urine if we decide to urinate, if we open this sphincter. But in some cases, actually, this detrusor muscle is overactive. It begins to contract even when the urinary bladder is not filled to capacity, like half filled. That's enough for the detrusor to contract. This is a rather common condition, and it requires some medical attention. There are medications against it. Now, urinalysis or analysis of the urine. Uh, First of all, how much urine normally should a human being release per day? It says about 1.4 liters. Liter is 4 gallons. Right? No, no, so sorry. Liter is 1/4. No, no, I'm not very good at I'm a European by my origin, so I'm better at metric system. Yeah, 4 liters make a gallon, right? So 1 liter is about 1/4 of a gallon. That's the normal amount of urine. Some textbooks, medical manuals say that up to 2 liters or half a gallon is still within norm. But remember, in diabetics, what is the volume of urine that they release, discharge during the day, or per 24 hours, day and night? Maybe 5 liters, 7 liters, a lot, big volume, and that's because glucose remains in the kidney tubules and osmotically kind of sucks water from the capillaries near the tubules, and so that increases the volume of the urine and the frequency of urination. Now, the urine should normally have no cells, although occasionally, if you do microscopy of a perfectly normal urine, you can see occasional red blood cells, occasional white blood cells. That's not a big deal. But if you see like a huge amount of white blood cells, red blood cells, platelets, then something is wrong. Then remember, this diaphragm of the filtration slit is wide open, and this may signal about inflammation in the renal or around the renal corpuscle. Now, some typical chemical components of the urine. You see, most a substantial part of urine is urea. And remember, we said urea is something that is filtered out from the blood and the glomerular corpuscle. Then it goes through the entire nephron without being reabsorbed, and it gets concentrated in the straight duct and in the collection system of the urine. Then let's read from bottom to top. Chloride ions, sodium ions, potassium ions. Now, the amount of these ions, this picture gives you the numbers in grams, but I want to make a little correction here. The exact amount of especially sodium ions varies greatly, because sodium is under hormonal regulation. Sodium ions can be lost from blood to urine in larger amounts, or they can stay in the blood in larger amounts, and then the urine will have smaller amounts of them. That depends on something that we will see on the last slide, on the renin-angiotensin aldosterone hormonal control system. Then again, further reading from bottom to top, creatinine. Creatinine is a poisonous substance. It accumulates in blood because of the work of muscles. Actually, creatinine comes from tired, overworked muscle. And it is not reabsorbed, just like urine. It is filtered entirely and then not reabsorbed. So there must be some creatinine in the urine. There also there is some creatinine normally in the blood, but normally it should be a small amount of creatinine. If it grows, then it means that the glomerular filtration in the kidney corpuscle is impaired, and again it may signal about the inflammatory process in the kidney, or actually even the beginning kidney failure. So the filtration is the most vulnerable process that fails first when kidneys stop working. Bicarbonate ions, again, their number can be bigger or smaller. If their number is on the bigger side, then the urine has an alkalic reaction. Remember, bicarbonate, negatively charged, it captures hydrogen ions, so it makes pH higher, the amount of free hydrogen ions lower, pH higher. So it's alkalic reaction. If it is on the lower side, then the urine may become acidic. And here, there's one rule of the thumb. Usually, your urine becomes more acidic when you eat more animal products, like red meat especially. Then your urine may become more alkalic if you do not eat meat but eat a lot of vegetarian products, salads, nuts, etc. And the golden rule is that the best. It is the best when it's in the middle, because deviations of pH of the urine, both toward the alkalic side or toward the acidic side, may provoke forming of the kidney stones. Right, so it's not a very good thing to have a stone, and it's actually kidney stones are oxalic acid salts. They are not soluble in water, so if they are in the somewhere in the calyces or in the papilla or in the ureter, it may be very painful, and they need to be removed again surgically. So it's not a pleasant thing to have. Okay, then last kind of, it's a little bit difficult, I know. We go over it in a lot of detail in the human anatomy and physiology course. You do not need to actually know all these details, but just look at the two large ovals colored in red. One of them says renin, and the other says angiotensinogen. And then at the bottom of the slide, in big blue letters, it says aldosterone production. Remember, aldosterone is a hormone that is produced by the cortex of the adrenal gland, and its function is actually to regulate sodium, concentration. More aldosterone, more sodium in the blood, less sodium in urine. And aldosterone is not produced all the time, normally, but it is produced in the adrenal gland when the kidney produces renin. Renin is actually a hormone which converts one inactive inert plasma, blood plasma protein called angiotensinogen into active forms of angiotensinogen. They're called angiotensin 1 and angiotensin 2. Uh, angiotensin 2 is actually an active enzyme that directly acts on the adrenal cortex and boosts the aldosterone production. Uh, just one, again, I don't want you to really overload yourself with the details. You're welcome to take the human anatomy and physiology course, and we'll expose you to more details over there in that course. But remember that there exists this hormonal system of sodium regulation, and it's a pretty powerful one. Uh, Angiotensinogen becomes angiotensin 1, and then angiotensin 1 is also not terribly active. To be terribly active and to act on the cortex of the adrenal gland, it must become angiotensin 2. And now, if you look second thick blue arrow pointing down, the conversion of angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2, this step is catalyzed by special angiotensin converting enzyme. If you read the first letters of these three words, ACE, you see ACE, ACE, right, ACE, and a lot of modern blood pressure medications are actually ACE inhibitors. So these medications do not allow for too much angiotensin 2 to be produced. And this keeps aldosterone under check, and this keeps your blood sodium concentration under check. ACE inhibitors are actually very powerful medications. They help a lot of hypertonic patients. If you have relatives or friends who have high arterial blood pressure, they might take some medicine which ends with pril, like captopril, lisinopril. All these prils are actually ACE inhibitors. Right? So they act on the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, and they do not allow the renin produced in the kidney to stimulate too much of the aldosterone production and increase blood sodium concentration. Okay, that's it. So we are done almost with human anatomy and physiology part of this course. There will be a couple of more lectures after the spring break, and as you will be taking your second semester exam, I will be working on these lectures. They will be on human reproduction and the skeleton and the muscle system, and the nervous system. These lectures will be rather short and not terribly into depth, because I understand it's not a human anatomy and physiology course, but still you will learn something about these organ systems. And then we will move to evolution and ecology. Ecology will be final part of this course. Okay, see you later. Bye-bye. Best wishes.